Hi folks, how's it going? Welcome to the next edition of Serverless Craic. We are talking about all things AI, all of the things. How are we getting
Uh-huh.
on, folks?
Hey Dave. Hey Mark. All
Yeah,
good. All
still
good. Living the life.
still drinking from the AI fire hose. It's never stops.
Yeah.
Changes by the second.
Absolutely.
Um,
Full
Funny
flow.
enough, I'm still finding a lot of the things that were in the book that are quite relevant, a lot of the concepts.
Yeah.
I keep doing the what's old is new again thought in my head.
Yes.
Um, there's a lot of recurrent patterns, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Mm.
So,
It's good to see the foundational sort of good practices are still good practices in the AI era.
Yeah.
yeah. One thing I am very happy with is it feels like the return of XP, extreme programming.
Yeah.
Them concepts are kind of coming back in, which is very cool. I don't think they get enough attention first time around, and I'd love to see them emerge again.
Yeah.
And Kent Beck is talking about that a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
No, big time. I think certainly as you say, drinking from the fire hose, and it's always good to have someone to your side who's looking at it with you, kind of going, are you good with this? Are you good with this? Yeah,
Yeah.
good with this. Let's keep going. And then even putting the brakes on, like, okay, yep, I think we've had enough AI for one day. Let's get a break. Let's have a rest.
Let's write some code properly instead of getting the AI to do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
I
100%.
know. So we were talking. So the third phase is next best action, and one of the things that the key concepts in that is code is a liability. And I think the quote that we used was code is a liability, the system is the asset.
Yeah.
The code is liability is an old saying, like we didn't invent anything. It's been around for a long, long time. I think it could have been put myself in the spot. It'll come to me. The original concept was one of the older agile kind of technical practices. And it was really about every line of code you write, you're introducing, something to test, something to secure, something to maintain, something to deploy. Like it's more work to maintain every line of code. So less is better. It's
Mhm.
going to annoy me now. You keep with that original saying. But suppose the one question is, do you think it's still important now that we're AI all the things? Is it still relevant?
Yeah, I think it's more relevant than ever. I think we are going to see an explosion of code creation and agentic code creation. But if you're not actively understanding it, reviewing it, verifying it, securing it, that is a huge liability that you're taking on. And if you don't understand what it's doing for you or what value it's bringing, then that liability is going to grow and grow and grow. Especially if it becomes part of a successful business, right?
Mhm.
If you have all this vibe coded capabilities under your hood and it's now in a production system and it's delivering value or delivering money into your business, that's a liability if you don't understand it.
Mhm. I think
Hmm.
it's a yeah, I think it's a tricky one. Um I agree with you. I think this, back up Mark saying I think it's way more important than ever for a number of reasons in the way we're working. I think, if you're, for example, when you're kind of going through one of these agentic workflows, you know, you're going to spend more time reviewing code than you've ever done. You know, um, and if you're producing a lot of code, you got to understand like that's going to take a lot of your time, right?
Hmm.
So again, when you go back to what we talked about, when we were looking at the serverless kind of ways of working and stuff like that, you were kind of preferring ways that were fairly low on code and using native kind of managed services. And you didn't really want to be liable for a lot of it. The other thing I'm seeing with AI is like shit tons of tests. Like so with the PRs are stacked, and not only that, they're they're maybe not split correctly, or they come with lots of unit or integration style tests, and then then it forces you into thinking, well, shit, is that process like why we're seeing way more tests than ever? What is that telling you? You know what I mean? It's like, are these good? Is this bad? What are we checking so much? Are we skipping out on the verification? Are we
Yeah.
skipping up on the expiration? So code is absolutely a liability. And
Mm.
And for me, I don't know. I feel like I'm constantly asking the question, why am I seeing so much of it now? Is this a is this a good thing? Is this just mean that we've got agents shipping more? Is this more outcomes? Or are we just seeing way more code? I
See, that's the thing, but you're absolutely right. Outcomes, code is not outcomes.
no.
And I think I just looked that up there. The original quote was from it was Ward Cunningham. So he phrased technical debt back in 1992, and code as a liability was part of that definition. And it
Mhm.
is actually a recurrent pattern because back in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a lot of generated code.
Yep.
So it's
Yeah.
probably that same thing. There's a lot of CRUD generated.
Model-driven
And
development. Remember all that?
yeah, all 4GL, all that stuff, like reams and reams of code. And it's the thing like there might be a lot of code, but lines of code does not equal quality. So there was a big push then around quality verification and all that stuff. So I think we're going to see a similar pattern now.
Mhm.
What's that, 30 years later, 35 years later? So it is the same pattern repeating. But one of the things that I'd be concerned about, and then obviously it came back then with serverless. People like Paul Johnson talked about it quite a lot, the fact that the code is liability and Dan North. So it kind of came back around the serverless era about 10 years ago. But I think it has
Mhm.
to come back again
Yep.
because people will not be aware of those concepts and they'll think, look, I've just written 20,000 lines of code. Am I great?
Yep.
Mhm.
It's
And,
like,
and and
no,
and increasingly now, like a lot of the good practices are being codified into skills or templates or prompts or whatever that you can apply to these things. So you can have this beautifully crafted, tons of code, all the unit tests, all the integration tests, all the end-to-end tests, all the chaos tests, all the, quality linting, all the sort of stuff in there. But if you're not asking that question about, well, who is this for? Why does this exist? Is it actually needed? You can almost become snowblind because it'll be world-class software that ticks every box for best practices and well architected. But unless it's actually doing something for somebody or it's actually valuable, the outcome, then what's the point?
there's nothing.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And then even if you think about it, like, so now you have the ability to kind of go after and do things that maybe you wouldn't have done in the past, like, so there was the whole sort of commoditized SaaS type stuff for all these libraries, and then you start to get teams who are doing more, oh, we could build our own version of this, or we could do this and this. But there's the whole supply chain around that as well, right?
Yep.
So again, you've got the whole, and you've got to manage it all.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You've got to manage issues with it and deviations in it. Um, so it's absolutely. I think it's very easy to kind of get caught up in the AI hype and then find yourself in a lot of bother just
Yep.
with
Yeah.
sort of what you've done, but not
See,
really
the
kind of paying off.
supply chain super interesting. I think there's a whole like
Yeah.
orderly evolutionary aspect of that as well. But before we get that, there's probably a piece around code bloat and
Mhm.
validation and verification. Do you know what I mean? Because um, again, you see this thing about engineers reviewing PRs, and PR has been really big, and that shouldn't be an issue if you have really strong validation and
Yep.
verification.
Yep.
You know,
And
Yeah,
if, if an
I
engineer
kind
has
of
to sit and read like 2,000 lines of code, then what's the verification doing?
yep.
I think the agentic AI stuff will accelerate you into all your weak points, right? So
Mm.
if you don't have good coding standards or you don't really have engineering teams that
Yep.
can think through a testing strategy, it's going to accelerate you into all those things extremely
Yes.
Exactly.
quick, right? So if you don't have a good testing strategy and your teams are leveraging agentic AI, you're going to find yourself with bloated end-to-end testing frameworks all over the place, and you're not even knowing what they're checking. You know what I mean? So you can
Yeah.
very quickly find yourself in a lot of
Yeah.
problem
And
areas.
again, this is just a replay of all that. Do you remember like years ago? Like remember rolling out an effort years ago that will say everyone must have a testing strategy. And
Yeah.
then there was always a team that would say, I don't know what that looks like. So I'll help you. Here's an example of one. And
Yeah.
then they go, oh great. Then they copy and paste it. Say I won now. It's like,
Yeah.
Yep.
You
no,
don't know what
that's
you're building yet. You can't have a testing
there's the
strategy.
critical thinking part.
Yeah.
Like, no, look,
Yeah.
that's what you asked me for. And you go, no.
Yeah.
Critical thinking.
Yeah.
So
It's back to back
that
to
that engineer's in trouble.
it's back to
Yeah.
the do you understand the users of your system? Have you codified their behaviors in some specified way? Have you got the key top 10 transactional flows in your test suite?
Yeah.
No, if you don't have any of that, don't unleash the agentic AI on it.
Yeah. I don't know what the test flows are. The product manager hasn't told me. No.
Where's the risk? Where's the where's it? Like it's really I seen a nice quote there at the weekend. Who was it from? But they were saying about like the good code is code you can modify easily.
Yeah.
You know,
Dave Farley.
Dave Farley, it was Dave Farley.
Yeah.
Like, you should be able to change it easy. And I still think that's the same thing here. Like, so you want to be able to make a change and, run the test set and be confident that you've made a good change.
Yeah.
If you need to do that and then go through 6 months of, end-to-end
Mm.
verification, that's not good code, right? And
Yeah.
that's not very kind of modifiable code.
So
And
I
there's a
think
really strong link there to tech debt as well, a definition of
yeah.
what tech debt is, like, which you'll not get into, but it's all the same type of thing,
Yeah.
you know?
And then increasingly, something we've been pushing for a long time is observability, right? So, you know,
Mm.
if you don't have good observability, if you can't monitor your systems, both in your non-prod and production environments, if you can't react and respond to signals rapidly, then again, it's hard to have confidence in any change going into your systems.
I think
Mm.
that's probably the biggest thing I'm trying to wrap my head around is, has things changed enough now? Is it, and again, it depends on the type of system. There's going to be different types of systems. But to me, like the most powerful form is always testing in production and being able to
Mm.
kind of react
Yep,
to regression or
yep,
deviation
yep,
from expectation there and then. And the cost of that, I feel, is kind of reducing by the day if
yep,
you set yourself up in the right way.
yep,
You know what I mean? So you want to go light, you want to go fast, you want to kind of go, go out to production as quickly as possible, get feedback loops, react
yep.
to feedback, move forward. And I feel like with AI, if that done well, but we never seem like, the industry struggles with that, I think, to a big degree. But with
Big time.
AI, there's tons of opportunity with it,
Yeah,
I think.
Like what? Yeah.
and I think then the emergence of evals and evaluation frameworks, especially for
Mm.
some of them, like if you have proper machine learning or data science models, or if you have any sort of LLMs in your actual production systems, the same request may have a different answer, because
Mm.
something changed in the underlying model that you're using, right? So you need to have more sort of natural language evaluation frameworks to ensure that it's roughly in the right direction and hasn't drifted or
Yeah.
deviated
Well,
from the expected outcomes.
how do you test a probabilistic system, right? You can't, well, you gotta just evaluate how
Ex-
close it is to the truth.
Exactly, right. And what are you comfortable with, right? So as the explosion of code comes through your system,
Mm,
it really forces you to invest more in verification, validation, end-to-end testing, observability, evaluation framework, evals. You need the whole system so that you can have a bit more confidence in your pathway to production, right? And that's what it's all about. It's like deploying with confidence, right?
mhm.
And plus the boundaries of your system. I mean, if you have we'll say a component and it's absolutely huge, doing a huge amount of work, like you're in trouble. But if you right size that,
Yeah,
it's easier to kind of wrap around it and do your contract testing and all that stuff and verify the expectation.
yeah,
I mean, the thing that I keep thinking about is, you're an engineer, so you are responsible for the
yeah,
code,
100%.
Mm.
however way it was produced. You know what I mean? Be it open source, you sat and lovingly typed it in, you copied it, or you generated it. It's your code,
Yep.
so you have to stand by the outcomes.
And you
Um,
need to do whatever you can to get confidence that you can stand over this, because you're going to be the one on the 2 a.m. pager call.
Mm.
yeah, exactly. And it doesn't matter, like you don't say, well, it's not my code, I didn't write it. That
No,
never flew.
no,
You know what I mean?
no.
Yeah.
Whether it's
And then
you
in your
or the
team,
AI on your behalf, you have to stand
people
over
tried
it.
to pull that move in production call. Well, I didn't write the code. No, no,
But,
no.
but it's
We're fixing
probably
it.
it's probably a conversation for a different kind of podcast. But we have seen the shift now. It is like, is critical thinking, systems thinkers. Really,
Mm,
your job in this environment is identifying like the constraints under which the agents have to operate.
Yeah,
And I'm finding
mm,
more and more now, there's no human hands on the code. You've really got to work out like how did this pipe or this kind of process arrive at that outcome?
yeah,
And sometimes
mm,
that you have to follow it all the way back to your context and to the skills that kind of, operate on top of that context to kind of produce those outcomes. And I think that's kind of where we're working to now, right? You've moved completely from a deterministic kind of flow to a probabilistic
yeah,
flow, and it's very different. I feel like there's a lot of overlapping skill sets, but there's certainly a lot of new ones that
yeah.
you've really
mm.
got to develop.
And that leads us nicely to, if you haven't invested in engineering excellence, if you haven't been paying down your technical debt over the last 5, 10, 15 years, you're going to have a lot of
Mm.
liabilities sitting around that are now getting swarmed with CVEs, security vulnerabilities. The race is on for both hackers and defenders to identify and patch these vulnerabilities that like Mythos is being early previewed to security companies so they can patch some of these systems. But we're already seeing it. I'm sure you guys are seeing it as well. There's a new wave of critical and high vulnerabilities that you need to fix immediately. And if you have a lot of old systems or old code or old libraries lying around that you haven't maintained or patched for sometimes decades, you're going to have to almost like stop feature delivery work to go fix those things.
Mm. I do
Mm.
think as well, I mean, sometimes people will say that that's what legacy code is. I think unmanaged code is probably a better way of describing it.
Yeah.
You could have code that's 15 years old that you're managing very, very closely and you know exactly what's happening. You could have code you generated this morning that's now unmanaged because you just generated it, checked it or committed it, and you think, well, that's fine now, it's working, but it could be still unmanaged,
Yep.
So are you across the tests, the security? I mean, that's the thing with code is a liability. Extra code means extra risk,
Yep.
you know?
So you need to have a really good assessment of your ecosystem and your landscape and understand, is this actually delivering value or is this a liability that doesn't deliver any value for anybody? Because you might just have to drop 2 sprints, 3 sprints of worth of work just to go patch something that actually doesn't deliver much value to your business.
Mm.
Mm. That's where I was thinking about the worldly stuff earlier, because say you have um what Simon would describe a commodity component that's not really important to your business, but you think, something we don't want to buy it, we'll just generate it instead because it'll be easier. It's not it's not the lines of code. I have an extra 50,000 lines of code of risk that you need to deal with.
Yep.
So it's like, why are you managing risk in a commodity? Do pay the small fee to use the service and let the vendor
Mm.
own that risk, because it's not just the fact that you've saved a few pound on a service. It's you've inherited all this extra debt and security risk.
Especially
So
if
that's
you're
why
in
I think that,
especially if you're in like a regulated industry or you have sort of public traded company sort of risk registers that you need to manage. You're just added a massive liability to that org that needs to be reviewed, audited, scanned,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny. And then the
So
way these new models, like the Mythos from Anthropic, are finding CVEs. I mean, they're still breaking the news on that about how it started. They can crack things like in no time at all and find 15-year-old defects
Yep.
that
see,
were
I
hiding in the
wonder.
code.
I don't know. I wonder how much hype is in that. Like, I like the current LLMs are pretty capable.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
if you were to kind of if you were to prompt like I list one of them out, but if you prompt some of them the kind of the current sort of flavor of LLM, they could do a pretty good job finding holes in
Oh yeah.
most.
Like if
That's
if
it's already there. Now, the
Yeah.
Sin Mythos is really, really powerful, but even if it's not, the next one will be. And I was watching a security talk at the weekend, and the guy was talking about the prompt they use to find stuff. It's really, really simple.
yep.
I'll not repeat it, but it's not complicated. You
Yep.
could do it in 2 seconds.
And like a lot of these good practices are being codified into like pen testing skills and security
Mm.
review skills, and just point them at your code base and say, do an assessment of this code base, and it will find severe vulnerabilities that once you're aware of them, you're going to have to fix.
But that goes back to what we were saying earlier, like having critical thinkers in, leverage this stuff. So again, there's checking and then there's exploration. Is it the Elizabeth Hendrickson testing equals check plus explored?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
we should be doing more into the exploration side and leveraging the agents to say, right, here I've stood up this API. Tell
Yep.
me, here let's create a security charter and test this out and execute.
Yep.
Like that's way more interesting, right? As an engineer, now what is it telling you, right? And what's that feedback loop?
Yep.
100%. Like if you are sitting on if you haven't been kind of maintaining this and you've got like that tech debt, that's to your point. Like you're even watching some of these kind of this SEA stuff. Like the amount of exploits seems to be going through the roof.
Mm.
Like the sort of the bad actors here are incredibly active. Um,
Crazy.
so
So I think, yeah. Did you mention Elizabeth Hendrickson? I was reading her new book, Signals and Levers, the other
all right,
week.
very good.
Very,
Is it
very
good?
good with system thinking. But anyway, it's a great book. It's coming out in IT Revolution soon. But anyway, we diverse. So I think, I mean, code is a liability.
More relevant than ever.
I think there's the risk about something not being tested and everything else, like, but the security risk is really that idea of unmanaged code. So as you said, Mark, I mean, it's if you've got your house in order and you're squared away, you're probably well across codes of
Yeah.
liability. But if you're carrying lots of access code that you don't need, I would
And I
be
think
concerned.
you'll see organizations that have invested in engineering excellence that have been constantly, continuously improving will be able to embrace
Modernization.
the AI era and it will accelerate massively. Orgs that haven't will stumble because they have to spend so much time getting their house in order to be able to take advantage
Yeah,
of all the new agentic capabilities.
Mm.
yeah, exactly. So that's the crack then. So that's still important. That's good. 'Cause I like that one. Code is liability. um, we'll leave it there. We'll leave it give us a click on the serverlessage.com on LinkedIn or YouTube, and we will see you next time. Thank
Thanks,
you.
All
everyone.
right, everyone.